Good afternoon. How are you? Good. I'm Jenny Chapman. I'm the interim dean at the Haas School of Business. Welcome to our Dean Speaker Series. I can't tell you how excited I am for today's discussion. We have Tony Fadell, an inventor whose work led to the device you're probably holding, or it should really be in your pocket right now. As the hands-on creator of iPods, iPhones, Nest, Tony's visionary thinking, design, and engineering chops and creative determination have literally changed the way we communicate, experience sound, and manage the energy in our homes. I will say I personally have benefited. I'm a long-distance runner from way back, and I remember back in the day, I had to use duct tape to tape a cassette player to my body while I would go on my long runs before the iPod was invented, which I could just drop into my pocket. I also benefit with Nest. We have a house in Lake Tahoe. It's now warm when we enter it in the winter before we get there, so I am personally grateful. Tony is the author of more than 300 patents from his time at Apple, Nest, Philips, and General Magic. He's also the author of a book of advice about building a career, appropriately called Build, which we have copies of in the back after the discussion. Ben Horowitz of Andreessen Horowitz called it priceless, quote, priceless advice for any young person who wants to build something great or change the world for the better. And now Tony is fueling the next generation of entrepreneurs at his venture fund Build Collective, which is designed to help engineers and scientists build a greener world. Tony's been the recipient of too many awards to mention. These include Time's 100 Most Influential People. 3 of his big inventions have been named among the 50 most influential gadgets of all time. And I would say that Tony embodies at least one of our defining leader principles, which is question the status quo. So I can't wait to hear how he thinks about disruption. Thank you, Tony, for coming to talk with us today. Haas students are always looking for ways to make the world better, and I know that they're inspired by your approach. So before we give Tony a big welcome, let me give you a couple of housekeeping details. So you all have note cards on your chairs there. If you have a question now or anytime during the event, please write it on the card, include your name and the program that you're in. My colleagues, Sarah and Carrie, are going to be collecting those note cards through the event for the Q&A portion, which will start about 10 after 1. Let me now turn it over to MBA students Fernanda Casper Ortolan and David Bravo, who will moderate today's discussion. Please help me in welcoming Tony Fadell.
It's on now. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Hopefully you got your lunch now, because I don't want to stand in your way between lunch. So eat on up. I'm ready for your questions, by the way. I want to hear what you want to say, what you want to know about. So let's take it away.
Okay, Tony, thank you very, very much for being with us today. My name is David Bravo, a second-year full-time MBA from Colombia. I started my career in consulting, then moved to a startup and worked with a Latin American startup that is trying to digitalize small and medium-sized businesses in Latin America, and then came to Haas.
Hi, everyone. Is it on? My name is Fernanda. I'm a second-year full-time MBA student as well. I'm from Brazil, so a lot of South America representation here. Previously I worked in tech companies, but in HR analytics and process management, and I'm now pivoting to product. So you can all imagine how excited I am to be here, learning from you today. To start things off, we know that your career has spanned from designing very innovative products to now investing and coaching deep tech companies. How is it different to be on the other side of the table now? And what are some unique challenges of mentoring and investing on those innovations instead of building them.
Well, first, Jenny, thank you for that very nice introduction. Thank you very, very much. What's the difference now than it was before? The difference now, really, if you're a really great investor or you're a great entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur who's thinking like an investor, and you're an investor who's thinking like an entrepreneur. It shouldn't be different. It does seem like a lot of times people are like, oh, okay, I got to worry about investors are different. If you're going to get an investor that's a really great investor, they're going to be a partner with you. And they have to have been or really want to be an entrepreneur. The worst investors I've ever seen are the ones who just care about the numbers. They don't understand the realities of how to build a startup, how to build from scratch, and all the ups and downs and lefts and rights, and understanding that nothing goes exactly to plan. And so the worst investors are the ones who just sit here and, I see them. They're still here in the Valley. They're a lot in Europe where I live. They're still just, I need to see the numbers. I need to see the numbers. They don't understand what you're trying to build. And then if there's a hiccup, they're like, we need a different team. We need a different plan. We need a different CEO, whatever it is. So really the best investor, and that's what we try to be, is the best investors in these entrepreneurs, because we have all been entrepreneurs. We have built things, and we understand how hard it is. Now, at the same time, the entrepreneur, we don't like entrepreneurs who treat us as investors, because entrepreneurs who treat us like everything's perfect, nothing to see here, it's all working to plan. The thing that I always tell them in all their monthly reports to us or in a board meeting, I was like, my first question is, what's not going to plan? What's screwing up? Give me the hard stuff you're working on. Don't tell me everything's fine, because I know it's not. And so entrepreneurs who treat you like investors, that's not good. And investors who treat you like just investors, well, that's not good either. So you really have to have a affinity for both, and really an understanding of what's trying to be built, because you're in partnership together. Because literally, if you're getting investors, you're getting married. You're getting married. And frankly, they're the ones who can divorce you. You can't divorce them for the most part. So just remember that.
So back in time when you were on the side of the table as an entrepreneur, kind of working on the iPod and then the iPhone for Apple, of course, you have had challenges along the way. And can you share some moments where you faced these challenges, and how did you convince the leadership team that the direction that you were deciding to go was the right one, even though you have doubts? And how did you manage all the pushbacks that came from the leadership team?
Or which one for which ones in particular?
It could be the iPod.
Okay. Well, first, let's roll back the clock a little bit before it was Apple iPod. So I was creating MP3 players at Philips and at no Philips stuff on there. At Philips, and then I had my own startup. So I was already doing MP3s since 1998. And so I was because we were making handhelds that looked like the Palm Pilot, and we were doing audiobooks. We were the very first devices to ever do audible audiobooks. And that was in 98. And so I was like, wait a second, this is audio. And I was a DJ at the time. I'm like, when is it going to do music? Because I was sick of carrying all my CDs around, and to do my gigs. And so I just started working on this, and I started my own company. I left Philips to create MP3 players. And I went to, at that time, Palm Pilot. I went to Swatch. I went to all of these different companies saying, hey, I can make this portable thing. Let's do it together. And they're like, nah, real networks, nah. And so I just kept getting no's. And I just kept at it. And then the fallout of 2000 happened, which was the internet, tumble. disaster, which I think is going to happen in AI soon, but that's a whole nother thing. And so I ran out of money. I didn't know what to do. I was making these MP3 players, and over a set of 6 months or so, then Apple calls, and Apple goes, "We want you to come in and consult." I was like, "For what?" Right? I had never worked for Apple at that point, but I worked with a lot of people who worked at Apple, and they said, after all kinds of NDAs and swore off my firstborn and blood tests and who knows what, they said, "We want you to make iTunes on the go." And so over a series of 6 weeks, I took the designs I was doing at my startup, changed them a bit, and then turned it into what became the iPod. And literally in my first meeting with Steve Jobs, 3 hours later. Now, how do you convince Steve Jobs, right? So at that meeting, it was, I made models, I made schematics, I made bill of materials, I made I set up the competitive environment, talked about all the technologies, but also make the business plan, right? And so you make the whole thing, and I was just supposed to be designing and engineering, not building everything. And I was like, no, we got to do the whole thing to pitch this. And literally at the end of the meeting, he greenlit the project. Now, knowing what I know about how projects work, that means we'll start. Doesn't mean it's going to get done. Even if you get it done, doesn't mean it's necessarily going to ship. Because I had been in enough big companies to know that when they say go, doesn't mean we're going to get done. And so I had to run. As soon as I got the go, it was run, run, run. And what was very interesting was, remember, Apple at the time in 2001, I was an official employee in April 2001. I was a contractor in January 2001. We shipped the iPod 7 months later in November 2001, which is a whole nother story. But all along the way, Apple was worth about $4 billion on the street. It had $250,000 and $250 million in the bank and $500 million in debt. And it was barely break even. Someone probably remembers that. Yes, Mark? And so it wasn't the company you know today. It had less than 1% market share in the US only for computers. So knowing that, I was almost not going to take the job because that's Steve offered. And so I was like, we have to run for the fences because Sony's going to take you out, all these other things. But I didn't expect that a bunch of people who are still at Apple today on the management team that you could go and look up on the web were saying, what are we doing this iPod thing for? It wasn't called iPod. It was a code name. Why are we doing this? We need all the money for Macs. Because that's the only thing we sold. This other thing, this music thing, we don't do that. Why are we going to go into this new project? Why are we going to do that? So I literally had people trying to shut me down all the way through the iPod project. These are people who are benefiting from that iPod project now. But so I had to call in airstrikes. And so literally you would call in airstrikes and go, I'm not getting the help I need. And then either Steve or my boss at the time would call in an airstrike and go, give him what he needs. As long as it's somewhat unreasonable, not too unreasonable, give him what he needs. And literally I'd have to call in airstrikes all the time because people want to shut you down wherever you go, right? And that's not just inside a big company, or Apple's a small company. That was only like 3,000 employees. It happens even in startups because you have investors trying to shut you down or competitors or whatever else. So you have to fight at every single step, and you have to figure out how to be creative of how you fight at each of those steps to get around things. It's not just making a better thing and working really hard. It's really about trying to figure out who are the decision makers and how you're going to get things done and how you're going to maneuver around them and hopefully pull them onto your team to make them part of the success, right? But it's not easy. You really need to build a following, a critical mass of people to get that happening, and it takes all kinds of people at all different levels of influence to do that. But that's as much as the job of doing the actual building the thing you're trying to build.
Moving a bit to a more kind of, could be a controversial question, is like, So innovation often comes with controversy. So on all the developments you have worked on the past, do you think there are some ethical implications that you could share your opinion on? It's like, do you think there are some developments that have done less good than expected to society or more harm than good?
Technology is neutral for the most part, unless you're building a poison or something, and even a poison turns into Botox. What do you want? So, whether that's good or bad, I'm not gonna do that. But look, all technology is neither good or bad. It's how it's used, and that's how humans use it, right? AI can be great, and then you could have deep fakes and for all the wrong reasons. So technology is more or less neutral. It's what we plan to do with it or what we use it for that does that. So, you know, the unintended consequences of when the iPhone happened, you know, was digital addiction, right? And so when that happens, and when that happened in 2019 and 2018, when it was really coming out, I literally, and I wasn't even at Apple at the time, I was screaming about it. I was screaming about it online. I went on CNN. I went on all the different TV programs going, this is a problem. And the people at Apple hated me for it. I was like, Apple needs to do something about this. Digital addiction is a real problem, both for adults and for kids, and you have to do something, Apple, because if you don't have a healthy customer base, they can't come back and buy stuff. And I'm like, and people are not buying iPads or iPhones or whatever else for their kids because they're like, I can't control them. I'm like, you're going to have a better market if you actually treat it right. And if you saw today, Instagram just said now they're going to do all these teen controls by default. Finally, goddamn, teen controls for you know, digital addiction and negative content and all that stuff. So it's incumbent upon when you create something, unless you're creating it for evil and using it for evil, and some people make apps for that, don't get me wrong, but if you're doing it for the right reasons, you have to, even if you're not part of that project anymore, go and use that, your influence, to go and make sure it's trying to be used in the right way. And so I always try to see the things that I create and with the teams that I create, and we try to, you know, even influence them, you know, well beyond the time when we were involved with them, because I think it's important. You know, I'll give you an example. Steve, when we were doing the iTunes Music Store, and we're going into video, and we were all sitting around the boardroom, and we were thinking about, well, what's the cut of apps and what's the cut of music, and that's a whole nother discussion. But it was like, what content are we going to have on there? So what content we're going to have? And then someone goes, oh, well, of course, pornography. It's going to be a great market. We're going to have, of course you're going to have that. We'll just have it age restricted. He's like, Steve went, is that the world you want to grow up in? You want your kids to grow up in? Is that what Apple stands for? No. We have ethical and moral decisions we have to make for society, and we are not going to have that. And he just said no. It could have been an incredibly profitable business, but we said no. And we did that time and time again. Every time, because when you're changing the world, you have to understand how you're shaping society in its next generations, and you have to feel really, you have to really understand, and you don't always get it right, but you should go and correct it when it's not.
Thank you for your transparency on those very complex issues. One thing I wanted to highlight about your book is how much genuine and honest career advice it gives. So for anyone here who is looking to pivot careers or just advance, I highly recommend you to read his book. And one of the central themes on your book is resilience and how to grow and learn from failure. How do you maintain and develop that sort of resilience? And how do you build that resilience on your teams and the startups you work with?
Yeah. So, look, I know you're in a very prestigious institution, and please don't take this the wrong way, but really, these are great training grounds. Once you've failed, then you know what you need to learn. Most people go to school and they're not doing anything. They're learning stuff, but they don't know why they're learning it, or they're learning it like, that's what I'm told to do, but they really don't know what they're trying to learn until they've tried to do it on the outside world, failed, and then they come back to figure it out. So it's, to me, it's do, fail, learn. Do, fail, learn. And how do you learn that? You learn it when you're born. So let me give you an example. The first time you try to walk and you fail at it, right? Do you give up? No. You're going to fail 1,000 times trying to walk before you walk. And what do we have? We have friends and family around. Yeah, you just stood up for 1 second and you fell out. You're going to do it. Go. You have an incredible positive environment around you to help you figure out how to walk. You do that with language. Everything when you're born is about trying, failing, learning, adapt. Your brain adapts to it, and you keep going. What happens? Sorry, I'm going to take you out again. You get into school. You fail once, you're fucked. Oh, what's going to happen? My grades, I'm not going to get in this college. What's going to happen? Ah! That's not how the world works. The world works after school and before school that you're going to try some stuff, you're going to fail. But then people get in this mindset that if I don't have the 4.0 or the 4.2 and I don't have this and I don't have this on my resume and I don't do all these extracurriculars, I am going to fail. It is not a prerequisite for success either, though, having everything. It's about understanding what you're trying to learn and applying it for solving problems. All right? You see people walking, I'm going to try to walk. You see people talking, you'll hear people talking, you're going to talk to them. The same thing goes in life. And so we get trained from early on that grades really matter, and if I do anything wrong, I am not going to have a future, or the future that I project. And that's not the case. I failed, and this is in the book, 10 years in Silicon Valley. 10 years before the iPod came out. But every single one of those failures was an incredible learning experience. So you only fail when you give up. When you don't learn from the failure, adapt, and then try again. And you keep trying and you keep trying. Why is now AI starting all of a sudden working now? We've been trying for 40 years, 50 years to make AI work, and now we finally got all the variables right to make it work. But people didn't give up. Now all of a sudden everyone's rushing to it. Still got a bunch of failures that it's going to go through. But my point is that's how you do it. You're born with that. You're born with a curiosity. You're born to learn. You're born to iterate. You're born to, and a lot of times society shuts that down through the institutions we have.
And another theme of your book is also about how you follow your gut and intuition. It's not about what other people define the product's going to look like, or only based on data-driven insights. How do you develop that kind of product intuition? And how can you share about how you defend your ideas, even when they're going against what the data says or what other influential people say?
Okay. So we're getting into the chapter of data versus opinion-based decision. So in life, there are many data-driven decisions. You can say, is this better than that? Is this interest? Do I want this credit card versus that? I can look at the data and do those. If you're truly innovating in this world, if you're truly innovating, if you're making something the world's never seen, there is no data. There is no data for you to help make your decisions. People always want data. And now we're going to get into consulting. Sorry. So what happens is that all these big companies that innovate and all these investors who want you to innovate, they go, give me the data as why this is going to be successful for this V1. So what do? They work on this, and they have the right gut instincts. They think this is going to go work. And what do? They hire a consultancy. The consultancy goes out, and you say, this is my thesis. Can you prove my thesis with data? I will pay you millions of dollars to prove my thesis. So I take the data back, and I can show my board, and I can show my managers, look, they say it's going to be successful. They don't fucking know. If you're going to innovate, You don't know. It's totally different. So the only reason why you hire these consultants, some of them, not all of them, but some of them, is to cover your ass so you don't get fired. And you never fire the consultants, you pay them. The consultants don't know what they're doing either. They're just like, oh, it's cover your ass. So when it comes to truly innovating, you have to literally go through it. Do, fail, learn. You take your best gut instinct. You surround yourself with really smart people. You don't go out, and I did this, you do customer research. We would pay all this money. We'd put these products in front of people. How do you like it? Would you buy it? These people never saw it before. They don't know what it is. They don't even know what problems it's going to solve. And most importantly, they didn't pay for it. They don't even pay for it. So you don't get real data. They don't use it for more than 15 minutes. And so all these people go around and get customer research because it's going to do, it's like, no. That happens version 2.0, version 3.0, or version 5.0. After you have built something, you go and you iterate because you figure out what worked and what didn't, and you modify it, and you work it, and you keep going that way. And so when you get into these other versions, then you can have certain data-driven decisions. And then if you're innovating still on version 2.0 and 3.0 and 4.0, you're going to have opinion-based decisions because the world's never seen it before. So you have to know the difference between opinion-based decisions and data-driven decisions. And opinion-based decisions, when you're innovating, you will get some maybe informed gut, but you're not going to get enough data to make those decisions. So you have to know the difference. And you also have to know, this is the other problem that happens in large companies or even small companies, is you have to know who the opinion-based decision maker is. Too many times you get these whole councils of people, these gaggles of people, and we're all going to innovate based on our groupthink that this is what it should be. And that's wrong too. Opinion-based decisions are made by a tiny group or one person. And that's why you see visionary founders or whatever else, because they're the ones leading those opinion-based decisions. They know what are opinion-based decisions and say, this is what we're going to do. Damn all the data, damn all your fear, because people in the absence of data have fear. So that's the difference between an entrepreneur and a manager. Is understanding when you have an opinion-based decision, you make the opinion-based decision, and you tell everybody, this is where we're going to go, and it's my ass if it doesn't work, not yours. That's called leadership.
I remember when reading the book, like reading the book and watching one of the TED Talks that you have that I also really recommend, that one of the advices that you give to everyone is to actually try to have a kid mentality or a kid mindset, to always asking like yourself, what are the regular things or the ordinary things that could be done better? Because it's just that the way things have been worked in the past. So how do you think everyone in this room, including ourselves, like could encourage and keep that kid mentality or kid mindset to not just, let's say, everyone is thinking about AI and how can AI disrupt every single industry, but maybe we're missing ordinary things that could be more important than just focusing on AI?
Look, you know, what you have to remember is you have to stay a beginner. You have to stay a beginner mindset. You know, you remember when you first walked onto this campus and you were like, what's this? What's every single little detail you're trying to understand and whatever. And then after a semester or whatever, I got this figured out. And you're like, okay, I got everything. Yeah, that's the normal process that we go through to learn about the world. But to be a really great product manager, to be a really great business person, a really great visionary, you always stay beginner. You're always trying to put yourself into the shoes of somebody who's just learning it for the first time. Great marketers do this, right? Because you want to tell a great story from people who don't know what you're trying to say. So you have to always be able to be ready to strip all that stuff away and go, what are the basic things we're trying to solve here? And stop being experts. Because we cloud ourselves, we forget all the details. And then that's when you see, new users of something, they go, oh, it must be me, I don't get it. It's like, no, those people forgot. about those details of when you're a new user. So we always go through, and this is also in the book, customer journey. And your goal as a team, product manager or anybody in the team, is go through the customer journey as a newbie through every single step. And remember that every single year when you come out with a new feature. Just because they use the product, if you come out with a new feature or something else, you got to train them because they're a beginner at that new feature. So you always have to keep that beginner mindset. And I'll give you one example, one incredible example we did on iPod, which was the iPod was really only available in the US at initial launch. And it was getting traction over the first kind of 2 generations. We didn't really sell it in Europe because Apple didn't have any retail stores. Back when iPod came out, there was no Apple retail. Okay, there was no Best Buy selling Apple equipment. Even Best Buy wasn't selling Apple equipment when the iPod came out, if you can believe that. There was almost nobody, chain stores anywhere, who were selling Apple equipment in 2001. Too young to know that, but it wasn't. So after 2-3 years, we had starting to build up some traction on iPod, and we were having these marketing ads like this, and we were getting into the 3rd and 4th generation iPods and talking about the features because we had primed the US market over 4 or 5 years about the features of the iPod, so people kind of got what it was, right? So you could talk about it in shorthand. When we went to Europe, we used those same ads, and we hadn't been in Europe as long. We had been in Europe maybe a year. We were using those same ads to sell iPod, and people were like, what is this thing? What? We forgot that they were beginners. And so we had to change our entire marketing program in Europe to go back to the early days of iPod that we were doing in the US to teach everybody what one was, to get them up to speed. So we, even at Apple, weren't staying beginners in our marketing until we learned the hard lesson and we rolled back the clock and then it started working. So staying beginners in every single one of your, in every discipline, not just in product design or something like that.
Thank you for that insight. And you have the privilege of have worked inside Apple and also Google through Nest Labs. And you also have very strong contact with the deep tech startups right now. What do you think that big tech companies could learn from startups and vice versa in terms of how to drive long-term and meaningful impact? Because we all often have the idea that big tech companies are more focused on the iterative and very fast small improvements versus the long-term impacts. What is your perspective on that?
Innovation can happen everywhere. And even at Apple, as I gave that example, when Apple was failing and iPod's coming, people wanted to kill it, right? So inside of large companies, you can innovate. And the reason why we were able to innovate at Apple for iPod was because we had a tiny little team that was separate from the big thing, and it was nurtured in a way to say, they need all the resources, they're getting all these things, so make sure you help them and allow them to grow. So let me give you a real-world example. In big companies, they treat little infant projects like they're one of the big projects that are already existing. When you're an infant in the real world, you need 24/7 care when there's a baby. They need to be fed. They need to be surrounded by all of these things to help them grow in society, right? And society is like the big company. There's all these politics and everything. They need to be carved out. So big companies can innovate, but they have to understand that our culture of how they do things is very different than how an innovative culture is. And you have to build that up, and you have to build that strength and allow that baby to grow. And then it can fit into the larger world when it's a teenager, when it's there. But before that, it needs to have certain special resources. Not just resources, but it also has to, typically in a large company, you need to compensate the people who are taking those risks because they're getting out of those other middle management jobs where it's like, I can just sit here and make my money and I don't have to work really hard and it's not like a startup. At Apple, when we were doing iPod, we had a whole different incentive structure. We had a whole different team. We had a whole different way. And that's why it was able to flourish. And then we did the same thing with iPhone. So big companies who don't do that, Then they have to go buy the small startups to be able to get the innovation in because they don't have a culture. And then what happens is, happened to me, is that culture then clashes if they buy a startup. Culture clashes with that culture, the big culture, and usually it dies. And so most acquisitions, M&A transactions by large companies, fail 80 to 90% of the time, not because it was the right thesis of why that company should buy it. It's because the cultures are so different. And so, when you're going to sell your company or wherever, it's also in the book, you have to really understand that the number one demise of most M&As is the culture and not the business.
Thank you, and I can see how that shapes your philosophy on Build Collective now, in which, as you were talking before, you're a lot more hands-on involved versus how big tech companies usually interact with startups.
I think we couldn't live with a question on AI, so I want to get your opinion on the current market situation. So where do you think are the most important opportunities in the market right now, the risks, and then who do you think will win this AI race?
Who will win? I don't know that. I'm not going to try to predict that. Well, I can tell you who's winning. It's those people who already own the customer, and they know how to fold in AI properly into certain things. So when Apple comes out with their AI stuff, they've talked about it, but they haven't done it yet. So they're folding it into the products they already have, serving the customers they already have with innovative features that are driven by AI. That's successful. You see it, Microsoft's doing it. They announced more Copilot stuff yesterday. Different companies are adding it to Adobe, right? They're adding it to their existing products, and it is very powerful. In many cases, they had AI, they just weren't talking about it. They were already shipping it, they just weren't talking about it. Now they have to talk about it for shareholders and everything else. So the people who already own the customers, if they're already innovating, they're gonna probably still be on top. So you're saying, what's the new companies that are gonna come out that are gonna, that I don't know. But I do know that the companies that are implementing it correctly for certain very constrained features, it does work for that. AI in general, look, you can't just generalize on AI. AI is many different types of machine learning and different types of algorithms for different types of activities. All that we've heard about was LLMs over the last 2 years. Large language models. At Nest, we put AI in, we were the first ones to put AI in a consumer product. We had machine learning, artificial intelligence that tuned your thermostat based on your behaviors. We did that in 2011, but we couldn't call it AI then because we'd scare everybody to death. What do you mean AI is taking over my house? So we had to come up with marketing language and all that stuff to make it work, and it worked, and the technology worked. So AI, and I've invested in a lot of AI companies. I won't invest in an LLM company, but I've invested in a lot of AI companies well before LLMs, and they're doing very well. We have AI in health, we have AI, in multiple health things, in drug discovery, all this stuff. And they were going on for years. So we have been doing AI for years, and you have to understand that that stuff works, and it's actually really profitable, and it really helps. These LLMs are a whole different thing. With LLMs, everything, it's basically hammer, so therefore everything looks like a nail. And so these LLMs are being used improperly. The data is being scraped from the entire internet. And let me give you an example. So when you have a kid, you worry about which school they go to, who they're trained by, which professors they are, what books they read, what environment, what their friends are. You worry about, from they're small, all the things that go on to help them learn and train and grow in the world. And you make sure that hopefully not much bad things influence them. LLMs are the exact opposite of that. You take the entire internet, you jam it into an LLM, and then you subtract out the stuff you don't want. So imagine raising a kid like that. That's exactly what an LLM is. And so LLMs, when they're trained on really good data sets, really firm data sets that do not have all this other bullshit from the internet and all the crap, those are the ones that are going to work, and they only really work for language models. Translating multiple languages back and forth, even into computer code back and forth. That stuff's really great. But all the other stuff we're trying to do, chemistry, no. Math, no. Physics, no. That's not what it's about language. And so you got to use the right tools for the right things. You can use CNNs, RNNs, BNNs. You can use diffusion models. There's all kinds of other AI things. So to us talk about what AI is going to win, what's all these things, you got to get much, much deeper. You really have to understand. And AI, it's always about the data. It's always about the data and what are you trying to solve. So you always have to start with incredibly clean and good data. And I learned that 2008 from when we were doing Nest. So hopefully that answers a few things.
Great. We're going to transition to some fantastic questions from our audience. This one is from someone who wrote a whole bunch of S's across the top. So I don't know what their name is, but it's S. But it's a great question. So the question is, what skills do you think will be the most important in 10 to 20 years? What should we invest in over time?
Being human. We are learning, and we have learned over all the years, that humans co-evolve with our technology. If you don't co-evolve, you die. You go by the wayside. We have to co-evolve with our technology. We don't have to try to be better than the computing. We have to be better humans at using the computing. We have to have better at emotional intelligence. When we humans, we say we have 5 senses. I believe we have millions of senses. We just don't know what they are. You know, when your hair stands up on the back, when you go in the wrong section of the city or something, you're like, boo. That's a sense, all right? Computers and AI are only as good as the inputs they get. I just told you, data is everything. We can't even make cameras as good as our eyes, right? You know, you can take that beautiful mountain landscape photo and you're like, oh, this is glorious. And you look at the picture and go, that's not what I saw. We can't make sensors that sense the world for computers better than we can. And so we, being more human, can train the computers to do computation and things of that nature, but they can't sense the world like we can. When we have better sensors than we have, then we should watch out. So until that point, we're going to be okay, but be focused on being more human, about leadership, about using the tools, not being scared of the tools. AI is great for training us and being a superpower for us to make us better. To replace us, yes, it will in certain very low-skilled jobs where it's just menial, but it's not going to replace us.
Thank you. This one is from Isabel de Elia. She's an MBA in 2026. She gives you 3 choices. I'm giving you one of those. We have a brand new Master's in Business Administration and Master's in Climate Solutions program that we just launched this year. So the question is in that domain. What do you think is the role of software versus hardware in resolving the climate crisis?
Well, first, you're not going to solve the climate crisis with just electrons. This is not a software-only problem. So everybody and all investors like, I only want software businesses to invest in. They're not going to be anywhere near the climate solution. Because the only reason why we have a climate problem is because of all the bad atoms we made over the last 150 years, spewing out all kinds of bad molecules. So it's going to take a lot of atoms with real smart software to fix the climate crisis that our forefathers and mothers created for us. So you need to have intelligent hardware software solutions, and it's going to be a lot more atom heavy than it is going to be electron heavy to solve this. And so we have to reinvent everything that flies, floats, drives on the land. We have to all the materials and how we make materials, how we farm. Every single thing that we created as atoms is more or less has to get changed out over the next 20 to 30 years, hopefully sooner than that. And you know what? That's an awesome opportunity. It's an incredible opportunity because back in the day when we first started electricity or we started power plants, it was just in one place. And then the world kind of replicated around the planet. We got to do it all at the same time. We got to change out all this infrastructure over the last 150 years we've been building at the same time. And what was beautiful was yesterday, it was announced that Norway has more, like 55% all electric vehicles now on the roads. Not just sell, because they sell about 90 to 95% of all sales are all electric vehicles in Norway. Now 55% of all vehicles on the road are electric. So it's crossed that majority, and it's already swinging. So it can be done. We can do this. We have the technology. I've seen the technology. I was just in an amazing company right before coming here. We have the technology. Do we have the political will? Do we have the will to make the changes? Because it's going to be a lot of disruption for a lot of people who don't want you to move their cheese. Don't take my cheese. I want my money. Keep giving me that money. Because they're going to lose that money, or we're going to lose our lives and our future generations. So be part of the change. Make it happen. It's going to be amazing.
Nice. Thank you. Yes, I think that deserves some tepid clapping. Okay. So this is from Mika Bernstein, who is an evening and weekend MBA student. And they ask, can you share some industrial designers or consumer products that really resonate with you and you think more people should pay attention to? So this is a question about your taste, I think.
About my taste. You know, for me, it's really about painkillers. You gotta really look at people who are solving pain. You can make things look beautiful, but they don't solve anything. They don't do anything special. Lots of people can make beautiful looking things, but making things that are beautiful inside and out and to really solve a pain. So, you know, I must say that there are a lot of beautiful looking internal combustion engine cars out there that I don't even want to look at. And they're great designers doing that stuff. Not even interesting. I care about the whole package and where it all fits. And so there's some amazing EVs coming and already out there. But I don't have any one thing. I care about the designers making cancer vaccines, and I care about this physical stuff is, the iPod or iPhone. Yeah, it's neat. But I care about people doing real stuff, so I don't have any one thing. I think there's amazing stuff. You're seeing stuff here in textiles, and that's beautiful. And that's an incredible power switch, and I think that's beautiful. So for me, I don't have that. It's not just about the aesthetic. It's about the whole package. So, and it can be done everywhere. It doesn't just have to be done in consumer electronics or something.
This one is from Vedant Gonka, who's a full-time MBA student, class of 26. They ask, we have creative thoughts many times, but how do you know which ones to pursue and get behind? How to pursue innovation in those ideas?
So you guys are all here because you're really smart and inventive and creative, and that's why you're here. And if you're somewhat like me, probably even smarter than me, you probably have all kinds of great ideas every day. Like, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Oh my God, why don't we do this? This could be a great business. We could do this. You have more ideas than you have time. And so the way I think about it, and this is also in the book, is that I used to chase after every great idea, whether it was mine or another person's. I would be like, run, run, run. Actually, now what I do is, well, that was an interesting idea, and I kind of walk away from it. I don't chase it. And then when it's a really great idea, it chases me. It's in your brain, and you're like, that's an interesting idea, but probably that's probably got all these problems in implementing it. I'm not going to do that, so I walk away from it. And then if it's a really good idea, I'm like, and then you start thinking about it in the shower or who knows what. You're like, oh, yeah, I could solve it that way. Or you talk to a friend, and you're like, I was thinking about this idea, but I don't think it's going to work. what do you think? And they're like, yeah, you would solve it this way, or you'd solve that. And so what happens is over time, these things, these little things, these viruses in your brain start going, and they become these big monsters. And you're like, oh, and I can solve it that way, and I can solve it that way. And so literally, I always try to walk away from all these good ideas. And I figure out which ones chase me. And then sooner or later, like Nest, I walked away from Nest for 6 years. And every time it just stalked me. And I was like, because you just learn you have so many ideas, not enough time, and you've gone through this, and it takes a lot of energy to pull it off, that you want to have. Most people, like, as soon as they have the good idea, they run and they want to go get the investors and everything else. You do it exactly the opposite. You go, you take the idea, and you form it, and you work on the sales, the go-to-market, the marketing, and you put all of these things together, and you form a business, not over a dinner with an idea, but over 6-9 months after you've kind of researched and you really understand, and you go, that's what I want to do. Because then you have even more confidence in what you're trying to do, because there's so many unknowns, and you got to cover at least enough of the unknowns, the known unknowns, not the unknown unknowns, but the known unknowns before you get started, because your time is precious, and you want to make sure you do the best job you possibly can.
Great. I'm going to ask one more from the cards, and then I think we should take a risk and take a few from the audience, if you don't mind. So here's one from the card. The person didn't provide their name, but they said, thoughts on Apple then versus Apple now?
Oh, really? Really? I'll sum it up in one sentence, or in 3 words. Apple Vision Pro. Moving on.
Okay. So you could just raise your hand and stand up. Yeah. Please, stand up and tell us who you are. I bet he can yell. His name is Luis.
Thank you. My question is, what are the biggest challenges that society will face in the next decade, in your point of view?
We're already in it. It's called climate change, climate crisis, right? That's the biggest thing we have beyond. And then the other thing we have is we have deep fakes and misinformation, but we've been living in it a while. So climate crisis for sure, like without a doubt. That's existential. But the other existential thing is misinformation. And people are worried all about AI and IA taking over the world and taking all of our jobs. I'm not worried about AI in that regard. People are also worried about robots taking all the manufacturing jobs. I'm not worrying about that. What is the easiest way to change society, to change people? What are the best robots in the world? Anyone got an idea? What are the best robots in the world? People. People are the best robots in the world. They're easily reprogrammed by deepfakes, AI, and everything else. It's people using AI to reprogram people. It was done in World War II. It can be done at a mass scale now. That's what I'm worried about. We are in cyber war. We are in World War III already. You guys don't know it. It's cyber war. Everybody's fighting cyber wars now. We just think physical war. Physical wars is the stupidest thing on the planet. Cyber wars are really scary, and we're fighting them every day. Between state actors, between individuals, it is happening on a global scale. That's what I'm most worried about, is these tools that we're creating, humans using them against humans to reprogram humans to have them do their bidding. That's what I care about, and climate crisis. Those are the 2 things. So I would love to get all those climate deniers, give them some deep fake stuff, or not fake stuff, real stuff, and use it to then get them out of that stuff. That's what we need to do. And if you just saw, actually, this was a really great use of chatbots. Last week, researchers showed that chatbots can actually deprogram people if you do it right. So I want to see more of those. So that's what hopefully that helped.
Hi there.
Hi.
Is it me? Yeah, okay. Hi. Hi. Thanks so much for coming to speak to us. I'm Vanessa. I'm a fourth year student. I'm really interested in what you were just saying and previously your advice on being human or having that skill set. So how how are we able as an individual and as a society to move towards maintaining the idea of being human when technology and AI, I mean technology in general, is just continuing to grow? Like how are we able to preserve that? Like, and
Put your
deprogram
phones
ourselves?
down at the table.
But what
Talk
happens,
to someone.
What if, okay, but like the problem is no one else is doing it.
Yeah, everyone's jumping off a bridge. Should you jump too?
No. Okay.
Right. It's called individual choice,
Yeah.
right?
It's just like, I wonder like how we could all move together to do it, like as a society.
It takes one person, and let me give you an example. 18 years ago, I decided to stop drinking. I stopped cold turkey. I went to Saudi Arabia for 2 weeks, and I was like, I wasn't drinking. I was waking up refreshed. I was not eating all the desserts after I had 4 glasses of wine. I was ready to go in the morning. I was sleeping through the night because I didn't wake up because my metabolism kicking in to process all those alcohol sugars. I'm like, I feel great. Screw it. Cold turkey. No more alcohol. Haven't done it since. I come home. Everybody gets around me and goes, you're crazy. Come on, Fidel, drink. You used to drink all the time. What's the problem? You're not so much fun anymore. How can you have fun? You got to drink. And guess what? Now, 15 years later, probably 40% of my friends don't drink. It takes one person. And then people learn from each other, and they go, wait a second, that might be a better way. Right? So, yeah. That's how it works.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
One last question, maybe back there in the green.
All right.
Hi, Tony. I'm Kritika.
Hi there.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
My question is, how do you create more time to complete things throughout the day when 24 hours don't feel like enough?
Say no a lot. What can you say no to, right? That was one of the biggest things. The more you say no to stuff is when you say yes, then it really matters. If you say yes to everything, yes doesn't mean anything. Say no a lot. Prioritize your life. Figure out what you want and what it is you really want. Not follow the crowd. Figure it out. That's how you'd make innovation happen. Because everyone will tell you, it'll never happen. Like, you just focus on it. So what do you want to focus on? Prioritize and say no a lot. So when your yeses mean a lot. Okay, cool.
Thank you, Tony. Please join me in thanking Tony for an inspiring, invigorating, and fantastic hour. We really are thrilled that you came to join us. We hope you won't be a stranger and will come back. So everybody, let's thank Tony.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Jenny. Thanks, guys. Thank you.